So for those of you who might not be familiar with the Sustainability Institute and what we do, I want to give you just a little bit of a background. We are a 501c3 that's based out of La Crosse, Wisconsin, and we take perhaps a slightly unconventional approach to sustainability. So you see, we're experiencing an age of disruption, unlike any really within modern times. And I'm not just talking about COVID-19. There's social inequity, there's economic troubles, there's environmental damage, there's climate change, and all of these are coming together in sort of a perfect storm. And they're going to continue as disruptive forces for at least decades to come. Sustainability then is often a message that's rooted in gloom and doom, right? It's about hanging on, it's about sacrifice. And this perspective of sustainability does very little to actually inspire us to act. So in our view at the Sustainability Institute, sustainability isn't just about simply hanging on or just doing less bad. It's actually about thriving. So the Sustainability Institute exists to really help the inhabitants of the Driftless region create a positive vision of a future that's worth running towards, not one that's worth running, or not one about running away from. So that future, in our mind's eye at least, is a really vibrant one. It's full of abundance for everybody. And that's an abundance of clean air and water, an abundance of decent jobs, an abundance of health and well-being, an abundance of fresh food, an abundance of connections to other people. And all of this while remaining within ecological constraints, both of our region and the planet. So with that introduction, now on with the show. Conventional wisdom tells us that using a full-size furnace and an air conditioning unit are darn near essential in this part of the country, and that we just sort of need to accept the fiscal and the environmental costs associated with being comfortable in our own abodes. But is that conventional wisdom right? And the short answer is no. It turns out that passive houses and passive house design flips that conventional wisdom on its head. And this is why we are so excited at the Sustainability Institute to that Scott and Amy Cooper agreed to join us today. The Cooper's primary residence is a passive house that they designed and built in 2016 and have been living in ever since. And they've been generous enough to give us a little peek into their own home so that we can learn from them about what life without a furnace and AC looks like in the Driftless region. And yes, it actually can be done. Before we move on to the tour, we'd like you to just participate just in a really brief anonymous poll about the topic of passive homes. And the purpose of this is to help us and the Coopers understand a little bit more about your knowledge and interest so that they can really tailor this tour to your experiences, to see really what you're interested in seeing and learning. So you'll see a poll that has popped up on your screen. If you could just take a few seconds and answer those two questions. So we'll give you another 15 seconds or so. Looks like 10 have voted already. All right, great. So as far as how familiar you are with the passive home concept, we're sort of all over the board here, some not so familiar and some extremely familiar. And then questions that people are most interested in, looks like the number one question is, does a passive house cost an arm and a leg to build? Or maybe 2 arms and 2 legs? With a few questions tied for second, how difficult is it to build a passive house? And what's the biggest challenge to build and live in a passive house? And then also, where would someone begin if they want to build a passive home in the Driftless region? So those can be the initial questions that guide us and guide the tour. And then, like I said, at the end of the tour, which will be about 15 minutes or so, 15 to 20 minutes, we'll have some time for direct interaction with the Coopers to ask them some questions and hear their advice. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Coopers.
Hello, can you hear us?
You bet.
Can you see us?
Okay, so yeah, we're Scott and Amy Cooper, and thanks for the introduction and everything. And actually, well, I think you already said most of the background about this, that we built the house in 2016. It actually took us 2 years to design it. And we'll go over more of the construction and some of those types of issues as we do the tour. But I'm gonna flip this around so you can see the house. Are you still able to hear us okay and everything? I'll assume yes. All right.
Yep, sounds great.
Okay, great. So, so this is our house. Again, as we mentioned, it's a passive house, and we're not certified passive solar, but we used a lot of the passive design elements. And so this view here will kind of illustrate 3 of the main elements here. You can see that the walls are about 1 foot thick, and I've got a model upstairs I'll show you of how the walls are constructed. But this makes them they're both very airtight and a high R value. We have triple pane glass windows, and most of the windows are facing south. So this is facing south out. We're fortunate it faces Lake Onalaska, but you want to have a lot of solar gain, especially in Wisconsin for the winter. And then the third feature is actually this floor. So this is a concrete slab floor, which provides a thermal mass. So you can think of it as kind of like a greenhouse. The sunlight comes in through the windows, hits the concrete, and you trap that heat in the concrete floor itself. So those are kind of some of the main elements of the passive design. But living in Wisconsin, you're not going to get by just on the amount of sun that comes in the winter for 2 things. One, it's colder nights, shorter days, and the angle of the sun is pretty low, so it's not that intense. So we also have a backup heating systems. So the top one up here is a mini split. So that's a heat pump, and it'll work as an air conditioner and as a heater. And we have these where we got a system that'll go down to -15 degrees. So even at -15 outside, it'll still produce heat inside. And then down below here is a thermal storage unit. This is hooked up to off-peak electricity. And it has a couple hundred pounds of ceramic block in it. And so if we turn that on, it'll heat up and just act as a big radiator. And we didn't use this last winter, the 2 winters before we did. If you know you're going to get a polar vortex for about a week or 2, then we would turn that unit on. So one of the other kind of hallmarks of a passive house is it's a fairly open floor plan. So you can actually see from one side of the house all the way to the other here. So it's the first floor is 30 by 40 feet. So not a huge house, but again, fairly open because you don't have the forced air with the ductwork and everything. A couple other features we did that aren't essential, but we like the idea of trying to keep things as open as possible. This is our bedroom here, and we put in a sliding barn door so we can have the door open and see the lake. But if we wanted privacy, we could close it. Also increases airflow. So you can go through and see, kids love this, they can run around in circles. We also put transom windows in all over the place so that you get natural light into the back rooms. These are the bathrooms here. Another thing I'll mention we do have air exchangers. So one thing with the house being so airtight is that you worry about moisture building up. And so they have air exchangers or ERVs that will pull the stale air out of the bathrooms and pump fresh air, exchange it for fresh air that goes into the bedrooms, and we have it going into the closet. A couple features, other features we have, everything in the house is electric. We don't have any gas line coming to the house, so there's nothing combustible in the house. We have an induction stovetop. These are actually work, I think, as well as gas, but they use about 1/3 the energy of gas or conventional electric. This is a microwave and oven, so just a single appliance that does both. So again, trying to reduce how many things you need to own. Another appliance, I'll point out, we won't show you all of them, But in the laundry room here, this is actually a ductless dryer. So these are common now in Europe and in apartments. You want to have as few holes through the wall as you can. And this actually condenses the moisture that's coming from the drying clothes and dumps it down a drain. So you don't have to have a duct going outside of the house. Most of the time, we actually just use this little drying rack down here for most of our clothes. We don't even run the dryer if we can help it. Finally, while we're in the laundry room, this is the north of the house, and we have 2 windows this big on the north of the house. So very little, this is mostly just for airflow. So very few windows on the north. Most of your windows are going to face to the south. So another feature I would say for kind of a good passive design would be your house is probably going to be asymmetric. It's going to have more window facing to the south and very little window facing to the north. So a couple other features that we did that I'll show you here that are probably a little more atypical. This is our breezeway here. And one of the things we did, the only basement we have is down underneath this trap door here. So you go down this trap door, and that's our cellar. This is where your, again, your water pump would be, things like that. But because we have the slab under the rest of the house, the only basement we have is basically underneath this space here. And we wanted to keep the room as open as possible, so that's why we came up with the little trap door concept. But this room is not heated. This is basically, you think of it, it's partially a mud room. So you can see this is where we keep all of our extra stuff. We have dog doors so the dogs can get out. The trap door to the basement. But the other thing we did is, this is where we put the stairs to go upstairs. So stairs are actually a place where a lot of heat will basically just rise in the house. So we have the door that Amy's by there is an outside door. So it's a regular door like for going out into winter temperatures. So we can totally close this off. It's all insulated and everything, but it's not heated. So we're not trying to heat all this space. And then if we go upstairs, this takes you up to the guest room. So again, this is kind of a bit of a different concept, but you actually go outside to get to the guest room. Of course, using every little bit of space, we made an extra guest room just on the landing here. So if people come to visit, they can camp out up here. But this is the guest bedroom. And again, it has its own outside quality door, exterior door. So the guest room's up here. Again, big south-facing windows. It has its own bathroom and its own mini split up here. The other thing we did that's a little different, and you see this in passive houses, is the water heater and water softener are upstairs. And part of that, a lot of passive houses, they'll have a hot water heater on the roof. We didn't do that, but you want to have that. Then you want to have your water heater as close as you can to the heat source. But also this way, the hot water doesn't have to go as far, like to get to the showers or anything like that. So you don't have to run the water for 10 minutes to take a shower. So the final thing I'll show you here, actually we'll shoot one more outside, but this is my wood shop. So this is above the garage. It's a new bed we're building there. So, but what I have here is a model of what the wall actually looks like if you go kind of a cut through version of the wall. So this is actually, I saved scraps while they were building it. And so on the bottom here, this would be representing the concrete slabs. This is your footer that goes down 5 feet. And it's a double stud wall. So there's a 2x6 and then a 2x4 wall in there. And the 2x6 is the load bearing. So it sits over your footer. And then the 2x4 wall is sitting on, this would be that concrete slab that we saw like down in the kitchen and the living room that goes over the whole first floor of the house. And then to prevent something called thermal bridging, there's insulation between these slabs. So it's 2-inch foam. Then there's another 8 inches of foam underneath the slab itself. And this is so that all that heat that you're trapping from the sun doesn't go and get stuck down in the, or doesn't go into the ground. All right. And then the wall itself, again, we have the load-bearing wall and the interior wall, the 2x4 wall. And then this is a foot across, and it's all filled with blown cellulose. And if we went to the outside of the house, we'll see our famous Tyvek here. But we have a fiberboard and Tyvek, and then they put these furring strips down and the siding goes on that, and that produces a gap in here to allow this side of the wall to breathe. And there's actually kind of like a Brillo pad foam thing at the bottom here, so insects can't crawl up behind it. And then on the inside of the wall, we have 2x3s that are attached to that interior stud, and there's a membrane here called Intello, and this also breathes. And so you can see I can kind of, it's pokey, it's not solid. And one of the reasons they do this is now you attach your drywall to the 2x3s and you can run all your electric wiring behind that. So nothing has to puncture through your membrane. So you make this really airtight envelope around the house, but both sides can breathe. So you don't have to worry about condensation and moisture building up inside of the foam. So anyway, being a teacher, I had to make a model of what this looks like. So that's the design of the wall. The last thing, I'll take you back down and we'll go outside real quick and I'll show you the solar panels. And actually on the way there, we just doubled our solar panels last year. And one of the reasons was we got a little plug-in hybrid car. So this car here, we can actually charge up with just a regular wall outlet. It takes about 5 hours to charge. But we increased our solar panels so that we could charge the car up from the sun. And this is, we'll get it's a hybrid, so it will run on gas as well, but we can get enough charge to get to work and back. So here's the backyard, wood shop. And then last summer we added a second set. So we have a total of 8.4 kilowatt system, and this is enough for all of our heating, electric, air conditioning, water heating, cooking, and also to charge up the car. So I think that's it for the main background. Did I miss anything, Amy? Okay. Do you guys have questions at all? Do you want me to turn off my camera?
I think you can leave your camera on, Scott, if you just don't mind going inside, and then I'll have
Sure.
Casey go ahead and ask some of the questions that we got beforehand.
Sure. So one question that that came up beforehand, actually this is sort of two questions. First, not everyone has the luxury to build a new energy efficient home. So what recommendations do you have for someone who might want to retrofit their home for improved energy efficiency?
Sure, good
And
question.
then the second question is, how did you correlate your energy demand profile to your choice in solar array size? So what's your average monthly kilowatt hour demand?
Sure. So actually, I'll do the second one first. So when we built the house, we went with a solar installer. And if you give them your electric bill for your current house, they can do a pretty good job estimating what size you'll need. For most houses, they'll recommend a 4.3 kilowatt system. It's usually 14 panels. That's what we had originally on our garage. We found that got us to about 80 to 90% the first 2 years. And so part of it, you are guessing a bit because it's a new style of house. So, you know, all of our heating and everything was here. Whereas at our old house, we had a propane furnace and we cooked with gas. So it was hard to totally make that conversion because we were changing our use pattern as well. We haven't gone through a whole year yet with the new panel and the cars, but actually probably this week we'll break even for the year in terms of we'll have generated as much as we produce. So I think we'll definitely be net zero this year. We might even produce a little bit more than we need. But what I would recommend is, yeah, just take your electric bill to whoever's installing your solar panels for you, and they can help you figure it out. There are also online calculators. You can put it in yourself if you want to do that. So the first question has actually a lot more parts to it. So if we think of all the components of a passive house, the thermal mass in the floor is probably something you're not going to do in a retrofit. You're probably not going to go in and take your hardwood floors and pour 4 inches of concrete on them. But the things you could do especially if you're remodeling anyway, you could work on making the house more airtight, put in better windows. If you were replacing, say, your siding, you could put in more insulation at that time. You could have a blower door test and find out where you potentially have air leaks and try to work on them. I should mention all of our lights are LED lights. You could go with more, electric or more efficient appliances, things like that. Putting in solar panels would definitely help. The other one, I guess, that you probably would be harder to do would be, again, when we designed the house, we made the house very asymmetrical. About 80% of our windows face south. A lot of houses are built more symmetrically. They don't worry about the solar gain as much as, the same size windows on both sides. So probably the actual design of the house and the thermal mass would be the things you couldn't change, but there are a lot of other things that you could change.
And Scott, going off the questions from the poll, lots of people are interested in the cost of a passive house and what that looks like compared to standard construction.
Yep, good. So the issue there is going to be there are probably 100 different ways to build a passive house, and you'll find some that do use atypical materials. And it's like if you start getting into concrete or steel or something, it's going to change it a lot. We had a student run the costs for us. He worked with Eric O'Neill, who helped him out with some engineering programs to actually do those estimates. And it came out that the costs were about 10% more. So if we think about what went into building our house, most houses are going to have the 2x6 wall anyway. So basically we're doubling up with the 2x4s, and then it was just some membranes and stuff. But other than that, you're still going to have siding, you're going to have drywall, you're going to have a ceiling and a roof and all those types of things. So it probably adds about 10% to the cost of the house. The solar panels then would be a separate item. But with each of those, they ran the analysis, the students ran the analysis for us, and they pay themselves off in about 10 years.
Great. And another question that over half of the participants were interested in hearing more about is just what is it actually like to live in a passive house? What are the challenges that you've encountered in the last couple of years? And what are the benefits?
Yeah, so I'd say the challenges, if you get cold and you really want to crank the heat up, you can't just like crank the furnace to 40. But the mini split and the thermal storage unit, if we really wanted it to get warm, we could. We tended to always keep our house, fairly cool anyway. But if you're somebody who wants, heated floors when you get out of the shower and stuff like that, that you could do it, but it's going to increase your energy demand a lot. So it's going to probably be harder to be net zero doing that. The good thing with the thermal mass is even in the winter time, if we turn the mini split off, the temperature probably gets down to around 60. So because there's so much thermal mass and you're so well insulated, you're really only heating the house up, whatever you're going from 60 to whatever temp you want, as opposed to, much, much colder. So I would say that's one thing, but otherwise it's really not that different. I mean, it just feels like a normal house. A lot of it more went into the design, like just thinking it through ahead of time, how we were going to build it. You also don't build a bigger house than you need. And again, we did some kind of unusual things like putting the stairs out in the non-heated space. Anything that you don't need to have in a heated space, you put somewhere else. And that really, you can make quite a bit smaller house. It still feels big, but the actual floor plan is quite a bit smaller.
And I do want to remind participants that if you do have a question, it looks like our chat feature isn't working right now. However, if you have a question, do feel free to put a little thumbs up or the hand clapping sign under reactions, and we can unmute your microphone. So in the meantime, looks like Dave has a question. Let's see.
Curious about the square footage. What is the square footage of that home?
Yeah, so our first floor, and actually that's a good question to ask because the way we measure square footage is the outside. And so when you start putting in foot thick walls, you end up with a little bit smaller square footage. But our approximate square footage on the first floor is 1,200 square feet. So if I go all the way over to this corner here, you can basically see all the way across the house. So this room is it. And then the smaller rooms are again along the back wall. And then upstairs, that guest room, it's probably around 300 to 400 square feet. It has a very sloping roof in the back, so it's a little hard to exactly judge that dimension. So it's hard to say, but I would say about 1,500 square feet. And it's 2 bedrooms and 2 baths. But as I showed you upstairs on the breezeway, we have 2 extra beds there. And actually, I didn't show you, we have a boathouse with a sauna in it that the benches will fold down into another double bed. So we essentially could have enough to sleep for beds for 8 people, if they were a little bit adventuresome.
Other questions that folks have? Scott, you talked a little bit about just the design of the house, and I want to get back to that. Where would people begin learning? It seems like it was a bit of a learning curve for you to design this house. You said it took 2 years to design. Where would somebody begin if they want to build a passive house?
Yeah, so we went through a couple of different architects. We ended up doing a lot of the drawing ourselves. We did work with Sonia Neuenhaus out in Viroqua. So she does, is it Neuen Homes? She has a company out there. She has does basically tiny homes, or not tiny, but like 1,000 square foot homes that are also passive. And hers are actually like passive certified. So she goes through the whole process with it. But once we started reading up on it, we more or less drew it out ourselves, and then we hired an energy consultant in Madison who designed the walls for us. And so she had the program so they could run the models and figure out how thick the walls need to be and the vapor barriers and all that. And then we took it to a draftsman here locally who took those designs and put them into the format so that the builder would know, here's where the 2x4s need to go. And then we were fortunate to get a very good young builder who was interested in this and really tried hard to make it all work and made it all work, as opposed to someone who said, well, this is how we've always done it. So I think that's the other thing that really made it successful. So Amy was actually our general contractor on this. You can be the general contractor on your own house. By the time we'd done all the research and everything, we kind of knew more about it than anybody else that we could find to build it. And like I said, I think we were fortunate with actually pretty much everybody we had. I think the draftsman did a good job. Our engineer in Madison, she did a very good job. And then our builder did a very, very good job. So I think with any kind of building, it's a team effort. Yep. Yeah, if people have questions on it, we're happy to sit down and talk with them as well. Sorry, that's our dog drinking. He's a loud drink.
Kind of sounds like my kid.
Yeah.
Looks like Kellen's got a question. Go for it, Kellen.
Actually, this is Maggie. Sorry.
No problem, Maggie.
And using Kellen's Zoom. Scott, thanks so much for letting us have a look today. Just curious where you sourced things from the lights to the appliances. I know you said some of them were more common in Europe, so just curious where you found those particular bigger items for the home.
Items for the house. I'll let Amy answer some of that.
Boy.
Where did you find the refrigerator?
Oh, you mean just like the appliances or lights?
Well, like the dryer.
What were you thinking?
I think the dryer,
Okay. Yeah, I just did a ton of research online. Looking at, these are really just Energy Star appliances. You can kind of go above and beyond that sometimes, but these were within our budget. So like these guys are just Whirlpool. And yeah, so really nothing fancy. So did that answer your question?
Were you able to get your ductless dryer just typically online here in the US? I think that was one of the appliances that Scott mentioned was more common overseas.
Actually, they're really readily available here now in the US. We ordered ours through Home Depot, actually. That was the best deal I could find. So what I usually do when I'm shopping around is I find what I want and then I find the best source, give me the best deal. So good old Home Depot this time. And so they're easy to find now, the ductless.
Like lights and stuff. Okay.
I think we
And
have,
I think like even the mini splits and stuff we got locally, these are Steffi's heaters. You can get those locally as well. So yeah, pretty much, I don't think we had an order. And then we went through Balduzzi Lumber. They were able to get everything for us. So it wasn't like we had anything we were shipping over from
Windows
Europe.
were even local.
Yeah, even the windows, these are H windows. So they're kind of a European design. They're triple pane glass, but they're made here in Wisconsin. Yeah.
so one question that comes to my mind with sort of in regard to the windows is, I know passive houses, the idea is for it to remain really tight and sealed, right? Does that mean that you don't open your windows in the summer?
Oh, we open ours in the summer. Yeah. Well, so you want it sealed if you're trying to keep the temperature inside the same as outside. So, or different from outside. Like right now, it's nice temperature outside. So we went with awning windows on the bottom, just so that we get a lot of wind off the lake, and we didn't want to have big windows that were kites and get a lot of moisture in. But then all winter we have them closed up. And in the summer, we rarely run the mini split as an air conditioner unless it gets really, really muggy out, and then obviously we'd have the windows closed. But no, if it's nice out, we'll open up the house. Yeah.
And I think we have time for one more question or so, if anyone's got one. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
Ask away.
Okay, yes. We've built 2 passive solar homes, the first one in 1982 and the next one in 1990. And the first time we had a big problem with moisture inside, and the builder had to come back and put in an air exchanger. We got smart on the second one. But how does this home deal with the moisture issue and controlling it? Is there a dehumidifier?
Well, first of all, we have the air exchanger. So we have that. And then when they designed the walls, that's why they did all the math to figure out where like the condensation point would be in the wall. And both sides of the wall are designed to breathe. So both the inside and outside have permeable membranes on them so that the moisture can get out. We do have a dehumidifier. The first year we ran it, just because, we didn't move into the house until December, and with all the fresh drywall, and they poured the concrete floor, just a couple months before, everything was still giving off a lot of moisture, and so we were getting all sorts of condensation on the windows. But that hasn't been a problem. Every now and then we'll run the dehumidifier in the winter. The winter is the main time you notice it because everything's closed up, and if it's really cold outside and between 2 people and 3 dogs in the house, even with the air exchanger, you're generating some moisture. But it hasn't really been a problem. I think now they can run these models on the computer, and when they design the walls and things, they have a really pretty good handle on keeping the moisture. You're right, that was a problem in the past, and that's why they have these membranes and things that breathe on both sides. So are you still living in the house you built in the 90s?
No, actually, we're retired now, or
Okay.
quite a bit past that. We just sold it 3 years ago,
Okay.
but had no trouble selling it. Actually,
Oh, yeah.
someone came to us.
Yeah, oh, that's cool. That's good.
Any final questions? Okay, well, seeing none, before we get into some closing announcements, I'd like you just to take a 1 minute or so to answer. There's going to be a survey that pops up on your screen again. You could just take 1 moment to answer that. And as you're finishing that up, I do just, first of all, want to extend my sincere appreciation to the Coopers for opening up their house. Great tour, really inspiring house. I think showing a lot of us what can be done. Even here in a environment that swings between really muggy and hot and frigid cold. So thank you, Scott and Amy. Thank you very much for that tour. I mentioned at the beginning that the Sustainability Institute is really trying to reinvent itself. And we're doing that by trying to keep a focus on the types of things that worked for us in the past, and then also by creating new programming that gets at the essence of connecting and celebrating sustainability in the Driftless region. So with that in mind, I would invite you to check out our revamped website at sustaininstitute.com. Here you can subscribe to receive updates on our programming. You'll find a blog that will feature regularly posted articles that highlight sustainability and sustainability stories in the Driftless region. It's also, this blog will also house these tours. So you'll see the tour that we just went on. It'll live in our blog. You should be able to access that anytime starting tomorrow. And the website's also your gateway to registering for any of our other upcoming sustainability chats. So in fact, the next one is coming up in June, tentatively June 16th or 17th. We're still trying to nail out a date, but it will be featuring the La Crosse Distilling Company, which is a fairly new business in downtown La Crosse that's doing some really exciting sustainability work. Again, we're trying to lock in the date. We'll get that out as soon as we can, but tentatively June 16th and 17th. So before we leave, first of all, thank you once again to Scott and Amy Cooper for letting us peek inside their passive house. Thank you to Carrie Thompson. She is the Sustainability Institute's sole paid staff member, and she worked really hard to pull this event together and is really running the show behind the scenes to make sure all our technology is running smoothly. So without her, we would not be here. And thank you to all of you who are participating in our first ever Sustainability Chat event. We invite you to share any feedback that you have about the event with us. You can do so at email@sustaininstitute.com, or if you just go to our website, sustaininstitute.com, you'll find a contact button. So email@sustaininstitute.com with any feedback. We're very receptive and open to hear about how you experienced this event. We hope that you found it uplifting and it hopefully inspired you to think maybe in different ways in the name of helping us all move forward in the way that allows the Driftless region to thrive now and in the years and decades to come. So thank you everyone for attending, and we hope to see you next time. Have a great afternoon.